Hi everyone and welcome back to CM Equine. I'm Corinne, I'm an equine behaviour consultant, and today I'm going to be giving you some tips about how to improve your horsemanship. As a behaviourist, I encounter loads of people who are desperate to improve their relationship with their horse. Most equine behaviour problems are complex with many different factors at play. However, on top of these additional factors, there's often some problems with the horsemanship as well. Horsemanship is often described as ridden skill. However, it can also extend to training and management of horses as well. But at its core, I believe that it's fundamentally rooted in a person's relationship with horses. This isn't just about your skills, it's about your understanding of equine behaviour, your attitude and your empathy for your horse or your donkey. So with that definition in mind, here are my 8 simple tips to improve your horsemanship. Tip number 1, release the pressure. When we work with horses, we're often putting pressure on them. This can be emotional, mental pressure. For example, we might be exposing them to something that they find quite stressful, quite difficult, maybe quite scary. And we also apply a lot of physical pressure. We apply pressure when we're riding through the seat and our reins and our legs. We apply pressure when we're leading them, and we apply pressure when we're just moving around them and asking them to move out of our space. Applying and then releasing the pressure when our horse is doing the thing that we want it to do is known as negative reinforcement. This is when we release a negative stimulus in order to increase the desired behaviour. However, where a lot of people go wrong is they think a lot about the pressure that they're applying, but they forget to release it. Sometimes this is just due to the fact that they don't understand negative reinforcement. Sometimes it's because they're trying to push their horse into the correct behaviour. Sometimes it can just be due to lack of ridden fitness. For example, an inexperienced rider who's not very fit and who's learning to sit the trot and the canter, they might apply a lot of accidental pressure with their legs and their seat in their hands because they're not very balanced. When this happens, horses that are exposed to a lot of these kind of riders become quite dull to the pressure and they learn just to tune it all out because it doesn't ever release for them. And going back to psychological pressure, if we're constantly putting our horse into slightly stressful situations, this can actually sensitise them and make them more nervous and more reactive. A horse that feels constantly under pressure with no release might be skittish, and it might exhibit dangerous behaviour such as rearing and bolting. It also might just go into a state of learned helplessness where it appears very stoic. This can result in behaviour coming out in other ways, such as with stereotypic behaviour, but it might also come out as health conditions such as gastric ulcers caused by stress. That's why it's important to understand and be really mindful of all of the different kinds of pressure that we're putting on our horses, and we have to make sure that we are releasing that pressure with good timing in order to reinforce the behaviour that we want. We also put ourselves under a lot of pressure to be perfect and reach our goals. We compare ourselves to the people around us at the livery yard, and we might even feel pressure from those people around us who might not agree with what we're doing or have not so helpful comments about it. And so it's important to be kind to yourself and release any of the pressures that are on you that are making your horsemanship more clumsy. So we also have to be mindful of the pressures on us, be a bit kinder to ourselves, because when we're under a lot of stress, it's hard to think about your horse's stress as well. We have to take care of ourselves so that we can better take care of our horses during training sessions. Following on from that, point number 2 is just to take your time. There's really no rush to reach your goals. We have to prioritise which goals we want to work towards first. What's the most important for you and for your horse's overall welfare? It probably isn't going to the show next week. It might be training your horse to stand for an injection that's scheduled for next week. One of those is essential for the horse's welfare and health, and the other isn't. And so if we've only got a finite amount of time, we should be focusing on the goals that are going to maximise welfare. We should be training one thing at a time so that the horse doesn't get confused, and we should be taking tiny steps in our shaping of the behaviour. We need to fully generalise our horses so that the things that we teach them, they can take that and apply it to other areas of their life. Because if you teach your horse to stand still at a high point, that doesn't necessarily mean that they will stand still in the stable, the arena and the field. You would have to train standing still in all of those different areas in order for the horse to understand that that is the same thing and that that's an easy, rewarding thing for them to do. When we give our horse an instruction and we're waiting for their response, we can also be quite impatient waiting for them to offer us something or do what we've asked. However, horses, and especially donkeys and mules, take a lot of time to process our instructions sometimes. They are prey animals and they like to assess the whole situation and figure out for themselves if what you're asking them to do is safe for them. And if they don't have a lot of trust in you at that point, that can take even longer. And it can also take longer for them to learn behaviours that don't closely mimic their natural behaviour. We might apply pressure on the lead rope and ask the horse to move on, and it might stay still for a few seconds. Now that 2, 3, 5, 10 seconds might feel like a lifetime to you, but it's actually not very long in the grand scheme of things. Them wanting to think about it for 10 seconds is not going to put you back in the day. Quite often when this happens, people will respond by pulling harder or trying to chase their horse and stress them or spook them into what they are wanting them to do. However, this just adds more stress and makes it more difficult for them to make the decision to do what you've asked. It also means that you're kind of teaching them to ignore the earlier instruction, which is a light pressure, and so in future you're more likely to have to resort to like quite a lot of pressure, which of course puts a lot of stress on the horse emotionally and physically, with the head collar being around their sensitive oral cavities. The horse's head is really sensitive and you want to train it to respond to the lightest possible pressure cues on the head, otherwise you risk doing permanent damage. Imagine someone asked you to do a mental math sum that was a little bit tricky, but not too tricky. It might take you a few seconds to just mentally picture that and work it out. If that person that asked you the question just stands there calmly and waits, you can probably give them the correct answer in a few seconds. It won't be instant, but 5 to 10 seconds hopefully. If after 1 to 2 seconds while you're still doing that mental maths, they start hitting you or shouting at you and stressing you out and going, do the sum now. Do you think you'll be more capable of doing the sum? No. If that sum was really hard to begin with, you might be like, I can't do that at all. I need a pen and paper, I need a calculator. I've not done this in ages. I left school a long time ago. And them shouting at you isn't going to change that. It's not going to make the task easier. It's just going to make it harder and stress you out. And when you're stressed out and you're thinking about danger in your environment, you're probably not thinking about maths. This is the same thing for our horses. And so you need to take your time, wait for a response, don't be impatient. Imagine the roles were reversed and just have a little bit of empathy. If someone was physically pulling you and you were a bit scared because you thought they were pulling you off a cliff or something, them pulling harder is just going to panic you more. Of course, we're not pulling our horses off cliffs, but sometimes they don't know that. Sometimes that puddle could be a bottomless pit. Because of their differences in their perceptual abilities, they don't see the world the same way that we do all of the time. And so it's important to take your time and remember that. Tip number 3, don't blame your horse and don't insult it either. Like I said in the previous point, horses are just horses. They don't think the way we do. They don't see the world the way we do. They don't hear, smell, or taste, or feel the world we do. They don't perceive the world in the same way that we do. They don't really have an agenda besides staying alive, eating grass, reproducing. They don't have the frontal lobe development in their brains in order for them to be malicious or devious. It's very common to hear people talk about how that horse is taking the piss, it's taking the mickey, it knows the right thing, it's just being stubborn, it just doesn't want to, it's just not doing it. But it's not being naughty just for the sake of being naughty and winding you up. Why would it want to wind you up? If it winds you up, you might retaliate by hitting it or putting it in danger. Horses don't want to be in danger. That's pretty much at the bottom of their Maslow hierarchy. They just want to be safe and eat and drink and survive. They're not trying to embarrass you in front of your friends or go, hey, check the neck of this one. You're anthropomorphizing because that can be what people do to each other sometimes. But horses are pretty honest, they say what they mean. A lot of times the most simple explanation for their behaviour, i.e. they're in pain or they're scared, is the correct explanation of why they're behaving that way. And if you start running your mouth and insulting it and swearing and shouting at your horse, that puts you in a really negative headspace. It makes you really emotional. It makes you feel humiliated and embarrassed. It makes you feel like your horse doesn't like you, which isn't true. It causes you to label them as just stubborn or naughty, or they're a moody mare. Doing this can result in us missing important signs that our horses actually are in pain, or sometimes moody mares, in fact most of the time moody mares, actually do have reproductive health issues. And if we just say they're just a cow, they're always moody, that stops us from seeking help from a vet. We recognise that mares are moody and we know that they're hormonal, but we forget that sometimes being very hormonal isn't normal. Us women know how frustrating it is when we go to the doctors about health issues with our menstrual cycles and the doctors just wave it off as normal. Sometimes this results in cysts and cancer and endometriosis not being diagnosed for a very long time, and then you just suffer in silence with it, with everyone invalidating your feelings. So why do we do that to our horses? Why don't we treat our horses with the empathy that we wish we were treated with by the people in our lives and our healthcare professionals? So next time you feel the impulse to insult or get upset with your horse and blame them for their behaviour, just have a quick think about, is my assumptions about how they feel and how they feel about me true? No, probably not. And could there be another reason, like fear or pain? Probably yes. So just de-escalate, don't get into a fight, see what it's like tomorrow, and then take it from there. If the problem persists, maybe call a vet or a behaviourist to help you, or ideally both. Tip number 4, don't bow to peer pressure. We all know what the horse world's like. Everyone's an expert. Livery yards and equestrian clubs can be really difficult for people like me or us that don't quite fit the mould. We're not traditional equestrians. We might not show or do dressage and jumping. We might ride bitless. We might ride whipless. We might do clicker training. These kind of things, like liking positive reinforcement and understanding equine behaviour, can unfortunately make you a little bit of a pariah in your equestrian circles. It shouldn't be like that, but that is the way it is sometimes. It can be really easy to let other people's attitudes towards what you're doing affect you and make you not want to do it, or make you embarrassed to be doing what you're doing. And it's important to try and not let it get to you or let it deter you from your goal of improving your horsemanship in the right way. What I do recommend is finding Facebook groups online and forums where like-minded individuals gather and talk about behaviour, and join them and ask your questions and give each other advice in there. We need a good community and we need to support each other in our mission to improve our horsemanship the right way. Find behaviourists in your area and follow their Instagram pages, follow their Facebook pages, even their YouTube channels if they have one. There's a couple of great podcasts such as The Willing Equine and Lead a Horse to Water by Trudy Dempsey. There's some amazing courses online such as on understanding horses, where you get to talk to these behaviourists like Trudy and Justine, and you can form a nice little community by doing these courses and get the support that you need. Everyone that I've met through these communities has been so lovely and so supportive. And so if you feel like a bit of a pariah with what you're trying to do with your horse, please seek out these places online or in person if you can, though that's not a luxury most of us have, and get talking to people that are in the same boat as you. Tip number 5, learn about learning theory, operant conditioning, classical conditioning. These are all topics that I will be making videos on at some point, so if you're interested in learning about learning, please subscribe. But in the meantime, there are loads of resources online that you can look into that will teach you the basics of learning theory. How can we be a good trainer if we don't understand how our horses learn? And you might be sitting there saying, yeah, positive, negative reinforcement, punishment, I know all about that. But sometimes refreshing your knowledge makes you realise, maybe I didn't understand it as much as I thought I did. When it comes to positive reinforcement especially, things can get really technical as you get more and more specific with your training criteria and your cues and your reward schedules, etc. I myself am still learning loads about how to do positive reinforcement well. That comes by doing practical training and getting feedback. And it also comes from learning about the theory from books and sources online. The more you understand the theory, the more easily you'll be able to apply it and help keep your horse and yourself from getting confused, because it's very easily done. Tip number 6, let them be a horse. Horses need constant access to forage. They need fresh water, ideally in a place where they can socially drink with the rest of their herd. They need company, they need friends, they need space to roam, they need exercise, they need access to browse and forage different plants, they need environmental enrichment in order to keep their bodies and their minds healthy. It's really common for horses to be managed in an overly restrictive manner, and it's very hard to find places to keep your horse where there is access to 24/7 turnout in a mixed herd, where the grass is always good and they never lose weight and it never gets muddy. You know, I know it's not an ideal world, however, we can think outside the box and find ways of enriching our horses' lives to the best of our ability with the resources that we do have. We can create log feeders, we can find safe branches and logs to give to our horses in the stable, we can do scent work with herbs and spices, we can give them stuffle mats and toy boxes and lick mats. There are loads of types of enrichment that we can do. Though our horses need exercise, that doesn't always have to be drilling our dressage or drilling our show jumping. Sometimes we could set up grids, we can do little obstacles, we can do some liberty groundwork where we don't sit on the horse. We can do loads of activities that will get our horses thinking and problem solving, which will come back to benefit them in our more serious spheres such as dressage. This will make our horses happier and reduce their stress. One of the 5 freedoms is the freedom to express natural behaviour. And so in order to protect our horses' welfare, we need to be maximising their ability to express their natural behaviour as much as we possibly can. Tip number 7, leave your stress off the yard. That's more easily said than done. Sometimes life is just stressful. However, spending time with our horses can really help us reduce that stress. Sometimes all we need is to give our horse a cuddle and have them give us a little neigh when they see us coming through the door, and our stress can just melt away, even if it's just for half an hour or an hour. We can listen to some relaxing podcasts and music while we muck out, or have some quiet mindfulness time while we're doing our hay nets. We can recognise when we're stressed and when we might not be in the best headspace to do some more serious training. We can say, it's been a stressful day, let's do something fun with our horse today. All I'm asking is to be mindful of your stress and to not have it affect your horse. If you want to do something with your horse that might stress you out further and cause you to act more impatiently or more harshly towards your horse, then just don't do it until you are in a better mental headspace. It's not fair on our horses for us to be quick to anger when we're working with them. You know, what if it's the dead of winter? Your horse might be standing around in the stable for 23 hours, and that 1 hour where you're there is the highlight of it. And so try and make it about them and focus on them and leave all your stress at the yard gate. Our time with our horses is just a really good opportunity to just take some breathing space and live in the moment the way that they do. And finally, tip 8, just spend quality time with your horse. It doesn't have to be serious all the time. You don't have to be rushing through all of your chores all of the time. Sometimes just standing with them, finding their scratchy spots, doing some mutual grooming, doing some target training can be really beneficial for your relationship. Finding out what your horse likes and where their scratchy spots are and how hard they like to be scratched and with what grooming tools or just with their hands can really help us when it comes to later going and do our training. People have a lot of qualms about using food rewards, for example, but you don't always have to use food rewards. You can actually use scratches as a reward, so long as you find a scratch that is actually reinforcing for your horse and that they really enjoy. You can spend time doing enrichment with them, as I said before, and this can be really fun and enjoyable for both of you. Do something that challenges but offers lots of easy wins and opportunities for reinforcement. Building a relationship with your horse is never a waste of time. I know sometimes it's raining and it's dark and it's cold and it's miserable and you just want to get your stable chores done and go home. But just spending 5 extra minutes putting off that hot shower and those pyjamas for 5 minutes, just spend some quality time with your horse, can really make a difference, especially when we're doing that every day. These 5 minutes here and there build up to something really meaningful for both you and your horse. So just spend some quality time together. And that's the end of my video. Sorry it was a bit of a long one. I have this video in written form. It's phrased slightly differently and maybe a bit more eloquently in places. It's published on Medium. I'll leave a link to the article below. Please share this video with anyone you think might be interested and give it a like if you liked it. Leave a comment for engagement. I will be responding to comments and chatting to you guys. And subscribe to this channel if you want to see more, and because it really helps me out. If you want a behaviour consultation with me for your horse and you live in the southwest of England, just drop me an email at info@cmequine.co.uk. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!